So welcome everyone. Welcome to I think the second webinar Quote This Woman's doing this year. In the year that we as an internal team have started referring to as the Great Unravelling, because sometimes it just seems that everything is unfraying faster than human rights defenders can knit it all back together in 2025. So this is the idea for this workshop actually started after a conversation I had with Asanda, who is one of our speakers, about how online violence isn't just online violence, it's actually becoming offline threats too for people who do try and use their voices in both media and social media spaces. So it was fitting then that we ask Asanda to be one of our panelists. Asanda is, she was Quote This Woman's first ever expert to sign up on the database. So for that, she will always have my hugest amount of gratitude. She's a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert and consultant, doing a lot of work in those difficult spaces, whether it's race, gender, class, poverty. She facilitates conversations that are hard to have, and she does it incredibly well. She's also a face that many of you will know as a political analyst on many radio stations, TV stations. Our second panelist that we have is Athandiwe Saba, who is not only a board member of Quote This Woman, she is also the former deputy editor of the M&G, where she established the first data desk at the M&G. And I thought I knew her title at Code for Africa, but it seems like she's juggling two things. But I know that the one that is really interesting is the work she's doing in AI for Code for Africa, leading up AI for the organization. And then I just heard you say you took up you're also juggling your old job at the same time. So yes.
I'll talk a bit about when I answer.
Awesome. And then our third speaker is Edith. Thank you. Then our third panelist today is Paula Fray. I always tell people when I grow up, I want to be like Paula Fray, which is quite funny because I think we're the same age, but I do think one day I will feel like I've arrived there. Paula Fray is she was the founding director of Fray Intermedia and Fray Training. Journalists throughout Africa have probably at some stage in their life either been on or wanted to be on a Fray training course. And Fray Intermedia is known for really doing communications that capture the complexity of the world that we're in and allow all of the nuance to come through, which is just so outstanding. And Paula was the first woman editor at the Saturday Star. So she also has a strong journalist background. So I can't think of better people to start getting into the nitty-gritty of what it's like as a woman, as a journalist, as a human rights defender, to be using your voice right now. Then these three women, and I know we don't have the answers, but I think we can just at least start looking at some of the questions. And I'm going to kick off with a question for all of you. Paula, maybe if you'll start. And then just briefly, and then Ati, then Asanda. So how valid are the concerns that bullying, harassment, cancel culture is something to worry about in today's world? Is it fear-mongering? Is it people just wringing their hands? Or are these really, really valid concerns? Paula.
Thanks, Kath, and thank you very much for having me. I do feel much older than you, I have to say. Um, I want to start off by just acknowledging that it takes courage to actually put yourself out there and have an opinion at this as a starting point. So, notwithstanding what happens in media or on social media, it takes courage to actually be out there and to have an opinion and to stand up for that opinion. And so, I think that even at that point, everyone on this group who is doing that is showing immense courage. I think our concerns are deeply valid. I think they are. I think our own personal experience is evidence of that, but also there are numerous studies, UNESCO, the International Center for Journalists, etc., that show that women, particularly women of color, LGBTQI plus persons, persons with disabilities, face a disproportionate level of online violence. And that includes threats, sexual harassment, doxing, targeted disinformation, misinformation. And for me, it's not just the violence itself, and Asanda is right. Increasingly, that online violence is going offline. It's the threat of violence that functions as a powerful silencing mechanism. And so no, I think our fears are valid. Our fear is not irrational. It's a rational response to the real experiences of others like us.
Thank you. Thanks. Ati.
It's not imagined at all. We all know how women are treated in the real world. That translates directly onto social media platforms, how women journalists are spoken to. Knowing myself personally, having worked as an investigative journalist in the South African context, how you're spoken to, how politicians relate to you, when you move into certain communities to speak about, to ask questions and speak about particular issues, how communities react to you as a woman. So it's not imagined. We live it already in the physical space. And then when we go online to have voices, to have opinions, to try to direct what the conversation is, to engage in the conversations, we get the same kind of vitriol. And we all know how much worse it is on social media. As Paula has spoken, there's been so much research that's done on social media platforms themselves. But it's just a continuation of what happens offline, and then that goes online. And it's not imagined at all, not imagined.
Yeah, great. Asanda?
Hi, I'm so grateful to see so many people here on this call. I think, I want to start off by talking about research, or actually a theory that Professor Pumla Gola actually created, which is also a book called The Female Fear Factory. And in this theory and in this book, she outlines the ways in which there is a factory of fear. And this factory of fear both defines women and women's lives and existence, and provides limitations and functions as a way to control women and women's voices, women's actions and activities. And social media has become one of the tools, as far as I'm concerned, in this female fear factory. And what we're seeing increasingly is that the violence of social media, the threats of social media, also then cross over to the real world. So I've been fortunate enough to not have had a physical crossover from the online world, but I have experienced a lot of cyber violence. And so I know, for instance, every time I'm going to I have to brace myself. I have to take deep breaths because I know that I'm going to get a lot of trolling. Particularly the platform X has been the worst, but also other platforms. So often media houses will kind of publish my interviews on YouTube. And if I go to the comments on YouTube, I'll find that a good 60 to 70% of it is literally people just swearing at me, accusing me of being paid, whether it's being paid by Cyril Ramaphosa or being paid by the DA, or like I'm always paid by different people, which is interesting. But whoever has decided that what I have to say is not aligned with their thoughts, they then decide I'm paid. And the worst of it for me is when I then get inboxes, particularly when I criticize former President Jacob Zuma and the MK. And it was at its worst during July 2021, because I was one of the people who were doing a lot of analysis at that time, because I thought it was important for us to be kind of to be very to be aware, but also it was very important for us to have proper narratives around what was happening there and what it meant. And this came at a very heavy personal cost, because I had people sending me messages on the daily via my inbox telling me how they're going to rape me, how I am effectively a slut and I deserve violence, and all kinds of insults. And it is, while, as a person, you learn that, you've chosen a public persona, this is kind of occupational hazard and it comes with it. But it really does take an emotional toll, because if you are spending your life being told how there's violence coming to you, it makes you a little bit more paranoid than you would be. If you are told that you are incompetent, that you are paid, and that all of these negative things are constantly thrown at you, it does make you check and double check your facts more. It does make you think a little bit more carefully about what you have to say. And whilst it hasn't stopped me from doing my job, it has certainly made me self-censor at times a lot more than one should. And I think, a lot of people don't understand that while it may seem like it's a comment, it's just an offhand comment to you, what it is that when you're getting not just one, not just 10, not just 20, but hundreds of those comments across multiple platforms, it really does have an impact emotionally. And for me, what's sad is that South Africa already has very few voices, particularly in the political arena. And so if we are going to threaten with harm those who do put themselves out there and those who do take the risk and have the courage to speak out, then we are going to see a shrinking of female voices and a shrinking of the space. And I say this not only as somebody who's experienced it, but also I also work as a media and communications consultant, and a lot of my work is in supporting with media relations. A lot of organizations like the People of Xolobeni, and various other community organizations that are facing, all kinds of threats on a daily basis. And I've seen it even in the sphere that social media in particular is used as a tool, and there's actual
Sorry,
warfare.
I'm going to ask you. Okay, thanks. Thanks. I was going to just ask you to stop. I think somebody's got a mic on. Can I ask you to all just silence? Thank you. Sorry, Asanda.
And sorry, no, I'm wrapping up anyway. So and the thing about it is that it literally gets used as a tool to make you self-censor and to curtail your opinions and your thoughts, and it is meant to have the effect that it has, which is a psychological effect, and it is meant to make you feel unsafe, and it does make one feel unsafe. So I think for me, that is the biggest thing. And the worst part about it is that there are, at this present moment, outside of one piece of legislation which has criminalized cyber violence, there actually is very little that one can do. And I'll talk, later, I also have a cyber stalker who basically is getting paid to watch my move, everything that I do, and to comment on it in very interesting ways. So it's not just a kind of temporary thing where it happens in specific instances. It's also kind of a long-term thing where I know wherever I go, whatever I do, there's a shadow that's following me, and there are people paying for that shadow.
Sure. So, Asanda, there's a lot to delve into more there. And what I want us to do is try and unpack some of the issues, but then also try and look a little bit at what we can start doing about the issues as well. But perhaps before we turn to what we should be doing, just again to understand some of the insights that Asanda has given here, I'll ask you, Paula, do you think that are there any platforms that we should be specifically careful of right now?
Absolutely. I mean, I think so. So first of all, I think that when we are thinking of speaking out,
Mm,
I would start off with the thought that visibility is not influence, and so deciding where you want to be, on what platforms you want to be on, also speaks to the issues that you care deeply about, the people you're trying to speak to, the outreach that you're trying to do, and to really just ensure that that you're being quite intentional about that. I think that social media has been really essential for feminist visibility and solidarity, but it's also a site of really deep precarity.
mm,
And the reality is that the algorithms reward controversy, not truth. And so very often for women, especially when we're talking about Black women, when we're talking about queer persons, this visibility, as Asanda was saying, it really does equal vulnerability. Whether it's troll storms, whether it's coordinated harassment, whether it's pylons, or in the examples we've heard, actually having someone to stalk you and just be there all the time. It is designed to silence you, and the reason why we're speaking out is because we actually is intentional. We're not speaking for the sake of speaking out. We're speaking because it has meaning. For me, I mean, I have to say that I have walked away from X, and feel quite frankly fairly good about walking away from X. Um, I find quite that for the work that I do, that Blue Sky is a lot more interactive. It's a lot more engaged. It has the kind of conversations that I really want to be part of, and so I would say that X is currently one of the most volatile platforms, particularly after changes to its moderation policies and verification. I think there are particular risks also sometimes with TikTok and Instagram. Um, but I also wanted to say that given the changes of what's been happening in the United States and the growing rise of conservatism across the globe, that what you're finding is even spaces that appear to be open spaces in which you can actually engage, are showing growing hostility, particularly, and maybe Asanda can speak more about this, given that she's the person most often speaking out, particularly when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and feminist issues. Social media generally is a very hostile space for feminist thought, even as it offers us an opportunity to be able to engage with one another. So I would say no platform is inherently safe. And you need to be constantly having a look at those platforms and what they offer you, the access they offer you to audiences, the spaces that they offer you for conversation, and to be making those choices deliberately.
mm, mm. Thank you, Paula. Ati, I'd be interested to know if you've got anything to add to that again, also just from the perspective of journalists who speak out on social media, since so much of your career has been in the newsroom.
Mm. Just to take off from a lot of my career is in the newsroom. What I currently do now is do a lot of research on disinformation and information manipulation on the rest of the continent. So I do a lot of work where we are tracking and finding a lot of this kind of hate speech in different African countries. With Code for Africa, we work in 28 different African countries. And what we have found is that there is an actual increase on these different platforms, and there has been over the years an actual increase in the amount of hate speech. And it's not just only for journalists; it's for politicians in specific counties in Kenya, specific. Of course, South Africa, we know that how people speak to politicians. So it's not just like a journalist thing, or they're just coming for journalists. They're women who are working in communities. One of the county members in Kenya went on maternity leave, and she's been getting the worst vitriol of where is she? She has not done her work, because all kinds of things about how she slept her way to the top. And so you get that with politicians, you get that with journalists, you get that with CSO. If you are a woman and you are taking up spaces in what people would think are male-dominated areas, or this is what men are meant to do or work in, and if you're a woman taking up those spaces, yes, they will come for you. And so there's a lot of research and specific examples that we've been looking at, and people are using different tactics as well online to track down particular women, finding you. If they find you on Blue Sky, I'm going to find you on Blue Sky, Paula, to follow you, because I'm feeling a bit lost there on Blue Sky, but it does seem like a platform we can actually migrate to. So they use different tactics. They'll put together AI-generated videos and AI-generated content about particular women, and there's so much engagement with those. Paula also mentioned TikTok. TikTok is one of the platforms that we do quite a bit of work on, and the kinds of videos that are there and the attacks on women that are there. So with what has happened in America, where the Twitter itself has changed its moderation policies, where we are no longer looking at disinformation, where it's no longer actually going to rule against things like hate speech. When you call women certain slurs online, they're not going to be watching out for that anymore. They're no longer going to be engaging with organizations that actually monitor those kinds of conversations. They're no longer going to be taking down those kinds of conversations. So there's definitely going to be quite an increase, and they actually has been. So we've looked at places like X, which is Twitter. That's not a safe space for women at this point. Facebook as well, because with Elon Musk being so close with Donald Trump in the United States, other big techs also want to follow suit. So Facebook has also changed its moderation policies. And we used to work quite a lot with Facebook, where they can actually take down certain disinformation campaigns or particular hate speech, would monitor that kind of stuff. They're no longer going to be doing that as well. And that's also in Africa. It's not just in the US. So that's Facebook. And then that leads to Instagram as well. So which kind of platforms will you be able to use? All of those platforms, there will be a lot more vitriol. There'll be less taking down of what the big tech say is free speech. You find that on Google as well. Google has made those announcements as well, that they're going to have less control on moderation. So Google platforms, including your YouTubes and other platforms where people post information, those platforms are no longer going to be looking out for the vitriol and the hate that is spewed against women. So we have to be, when you decide on a particular platform, right now I'm mostly engaged on LinkedIn, because that's where I'm meeting people who are in the same kind of space that I want to work in, and I get to learn quite a lot. It's not as social as we had gotten used to as other platforms, but it is got so much less of the visual that you find on all these other platforms. So I think that.
Sorry, Ati. So I just wonder, if you don't mind, I want to come back to something that Paula said. And so, I mean, I think you made such a good point, Paula, where you said visibility isn't influence. And in saying that, one understands rather moving to the platforms that are safer. But Ati, what about, and I think I would like Asanda and Paula to also comment after you on this. What happens when we step back from the vitriolic platforms? Is that not just giving into pressure? Like, is it not just allowing certain narratives to run riot on those platforms?
And this is the challenging part of actually having a voice and engaging. And I'll keep bringing it back to the the physical space outside of social media. What do we do? Do we stop telling stories as journalists? Do we stop going into environments where we feel that there is some level of harm? Because as women on these particular platforms, when I post something about Elon Musk and whatever Elon Musk has said, one, I'm bombarded with far-right lunatics who want to troll me, or I only get all pro far-right lunatic information when I'm on X. Possibly that's a bit less on Facebook, but do I really want to engage with putting out my thoughts in there? And yes, unfortunately, it does at some point affect our mental health. So therefore, you have to
Hugely.
weigh out whether you are going to fight the fight and essentially, as Asanda was saying, that she has to take a deep breath when she comments about the EFF. And I think there's many women who have to do that. That has an eroding effect on who we are, how we engage with information, how we engage with news. It has an eroding effect to constantly be in that fight or flight mode. So is it better to go and find other spaces, safer spaces, or how much energy and how much energy do you have to continue fighting in those spaces? It's that kind of balance.
Absolutely. Paula, I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
So, I mean, I should clarify. When I say that visibility is not influence, I'm not in any way saying don't be visible. I'm saying be intentional about your visibility in order to gauge the influence. And so for me, it's you know, the decision to move away from X was simply because it did not feel like there was an actual conversation happening and that people were engaging with the issues that I wanted to actually be platforming. And so moving on to different spaces is not just an issue of safety, but also an issue of where am I most likely going to be able to build an audience so that when I need to engage around an issue, it's the right audience that I'm speaking to. So that's the first. And then the second thing is that I think I do want to say though that the harassment online is designed to really mute us and that we should not allow that to overwhelm us. But at the same time, I've also seen the impact of harassment online and the toll that it can take on people's well-being. And so I think that when we use social media and media as a tool, we need to do it in a way that really recognizes its impact on the issues that we're engaging around, but also its impact on ourselves. And so the reason why I really wanted to be part of this workshop is because I encourage people to speak out. But I also encourage people to really understand what the risks are so that they can mitigate the risks and continue to speak out. And so it's almost that in terms of which platforms are you using? What are the risks associated with those platforms? When I speak out, am I able to triage harassment? Do I know when to engage, mute, ignore, block? Do I know when it's an issue that really I need to escalate? Because we do need to speak out. Otherwise, we may as well just kind of put our hands up and admit defeat. We do need to speak out, but I want us to speak out intentionally on the spaces that have impact. And when we do that, to be able to protect ourselves effectively.
Okay. And I guess you've made a really, really good point there about looking after yourself and understanding the trauma and having the response to that. So Asanda, you're someone who lives this both in the courage with which you use your voice, but also your DEI work where you come from a trauma-informed perspective in the consulting that you do. So how do you manage that yourself? Because now it's not that you are teaching it to someone else, but you're actually having to put it in practice on a very, very literal level every day of your life. I mean, when you said that people are being paid to troll you, I mean, I got shivers down my back. That sounds awful.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, what became very important is understanding, um, is thinking through what it is, like, who am I and what am I trying to achieve in using my voice? And thinking through, if I remove my voice from the space, what does it mean for those who, for various reasons, are not able to amplify their voices? And it's in always kind of keeping my eye on the goal that I'm able to continue to do this work despite of the challenges. There are many. So the first thing is that I had to learn and kind of constantly have to remind myself that I am not the race whisperer. I found colonialism, apartheid, and everything in this here country, and I'm going to die and leave it here. So there are limitations to the work that I do. There are places that I may go to but may have to retract, and that is just the nature of the job. But what was important was recognizing that it is not my responsibility to change people from racist to non-racist. My responsibility is to support those who are interested in changing to get to that point. And when I kind of made that very clear for myself, it really kind of changed the ways in which I looked at my work. And I think it's the same in politics. My work is not to change people from ANC voters to DA voters, from DA voters to ANC voters, or any of that. My work is to explain to South Africans what political events mean and the impact that they have on their daily lives. And if that means I have to call out a Julius Malema or an EFF, or I have to call out a Jacob Zuma and an MK, then that's what I'm going to do, because it is important that I use this voice that I have, that I use these platforms that I have responsibly. But when it comes to protecting myself, there's various things that I do. So one of the things that I do is I have a Twitter account. I'm one of those people that support people leaving Twitter, but I will be one of the last people left on Twitter for one reason. We cannot turn away from the ugly. And the reason for that is, for as long as there is Twitter, which is a toxic space where these ideas are propagating, we need to know and understand what's happening and where these toxic ideas are being shared and engaged with. And so, as a sociologist, and somebody who is fascinated by the human mind and how it works. That's why I'm there. As somebody who's a GBV activist, I'm there because I need to understand, when I'm building a campaign against GBV, who it is that I'm talking to and how it is that they think. So think of it like research. So I'm not on Twitter posting. I mean, I'm sure if you go to my Twitter account, you'll find that I last posted maybe last year, or even, like, I don't know. I don't even know when I was last, posting from my account. So that's not what that account is there. It's there for me to have an idea what's happening, to see the toxic, which direction the toxic is taking, and think about it as when I'm building campaigns around GBV, which I do a lot of. What does it mean? What are the conversations? What are the narratives that are being built, so that I can counter them appropriately? So you'll hardly ever find me commenting on anything on Twitter. You'll hardly ever find me. I don't even want to be tagged on things on Twitter, because I know the kind of space that it is. I've joined Blue Sky, but I hardly ever use it after I joined it, because I also feel like sometimes for your mental health, you have to actually kind of figure out, where is my time best used. So I agree with Paula that visibility is not influence. Influence is something different to visibility. So just because you're everywhere invisible, it doesn't mean that you are influencing. So you have to be intentional 100% with the voice that you have, what your message is, and where you think it's best placed. So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on Facebook, and a little bit of time on Instagram. So a lot of my kind of everyday thoughts, comments, engagements are happening on LinkedIn, and not on Twitter. And I started recently using, I've had an account on TikTok for about a year now, but I've only started recently kind of wading into it, because the other thing about social media that people don't understand is that it's a 24/7 job. And once you start engaging, it's very difficult like out. And so I always like kind of say, sometimes you'll be doing a piece of work and somebody's gonna say, how many followers do you have? And I often say that, I'm doing public analysis, I'm working as a media and communications consultant, I'm facilitating, I'm sitting on SANEF and various other platforms. I don't have time to make social media my full-time job on top of everything. And I actually do run social media campaigns. So I know exactly what I need to do if I wanted to get 1 million followers, but that would mean making it my full-time job. And so I invest some time in social media, but I don't make social media my job, because I also believe that, for me, it's about, I know that if I'm on SABC, I'm reaching 1 million people in one conversation. So for me, that's impact, that's influence, that's power. And I have enough people on the other platforms outside of Twitter, on Facebook. People are giving me regular feedback on my professional page about what they think about my analysis and what my thoughts are. And I am very generous with my block button, whether it's on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on any platform. I'm very generous with my block button, because I think sometimes we want to engage people that we shouldn't, that we're just going to be wasting our time. We're going to be making ourselves even more angry. And that's why it was important for me to get to that point of saying, it is not my job to change people. It is my job to support those who are interested in change. And if you understand that, then you can very quickly decide which comment is someone really honestly, earnestly trying to understand, and which comment is somebody just trying to gaslight you. Because as I've said, this stuff has an emotional toll. And even on Twitter, I have had to learn, and it's a very difficult thing when you're in the public eye, to learn to be ignorant about what people think of you. And so I'll go on Twitter and do my name search maybe once in 3 months, or even once in 6 months. And it's always hilarious, because I'll find like 6 months later that there was a particular interview I did and everybody lost their mind. And I didn't even know, because I wasn't kind of digging up for that kind of stuff. And so it's very important to be hyper aware.
Sure. No, that's amazing. Thank you, Asanda. Those are really great comments. So I just want to say to those who are listening, please, if you have questions, please do post them in the chat. I'm going to ask our team one more round of questions, then I will look and see if there's anything in the chat that has been addressed to the team. And I think I want to pick up on what Asanda said and put this to Ati and to Paula. For new experts on the Quote This Woman database who are coming in at this really difficult time in the geopolitical space, and who are thinking, should I put my voice forward? What is your advice to them? For someone who's just started dipping their toe in the water and started thinking, yo, this water's going to burn me. What is your advice to them? So I don't know, Ati, if you want to go, and then Asanda, and then Paula. But if I can ask you guys to just keep it succinct so that we can also see if there are questions.
So I definitely think that voices should still be heard. And there's different ways of publishing and putting your voices out there. It doesn't always have to be 160 characters anymore. There are different platforms. I think it just kind of goes back to what Paula had mentioned. What do you want to achieve? Do you want more broader ideas of yours to be shared in mainstream media? How do you engage with mainstream media? Are you engaging with particular journalists? Is that how you want your voice put out there, where you actually get quoted, or will you write analysis pieces for particular platforms, and then become an expert in that kind of way, where you don't have to be dealing with the vitriol? Yes, conversation is very important to expand your ideas and your thinking about your particular the particular area that you're an expert in. That's completely agreeable. However, the vitriol that comes with it, that you don't know what you're doing, it's much more dangerous than actually putting in the effort to be on some of those platforms. So my advice would be, what exactly do you want to achieve in putting your voice out there? What spaces are the people that you want to talk to? Where are they? Which spaces are they? Are they really on TikTok? Are they really on TikTok? Is it young people that you want to talk to? Who are you following? Who is in the circles that you want to talk to? So those are some of the basic questions you should be asking yourself as you are going into getting your voice out there. I think 10, 15 years ago, it was much easier. All you had to do was just create an account and just see where it goes. Nowadays, I think there's a lot more thought that needs to go into what is your brand? Who are you talking to? Why you want to talk to them? And where are those people that you want to influence? Are they reading
So,
my newspapers, or are they tweeting on Twitter? And you will find the people that you need to be actually conversing with.
so you're saying do it, but be intentional, huh?
I think Paula's advice was spot on. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Asanda, I'm going to ask you your thoughts.
I mean, I think I've already said. So it's the
For
most
new
important thing for
people.
me.
So
Yeah,
for
the most important thing as a new person, you
Mm.
must make sure that your family is on board. If your family is not on board, you are not going to succeed. So one of the places I go to when everybody hates me effectively, is my family. And my family and my friends are the people who remind me, who am I? Why am I doing this? And why it's important to continue, or why it's important to actually not continue. Because that's the other thing I meant to say, that there will be times where you really want to speak, but you shouldn't, because you have to save your mental health and you have to save your sanity. And bravery is about as much as pushing when it's hard as it is about acknowledging that this is too much and I don't have the capacity for it. And so in my family, and particularly with my husband, he tells me that this is too much. It doesn't make sense anymore. And when I'm feeling like I'm so done with this, I can't do it, he reminds me why this is important. And so you need to find people in your life, your family, your friends, whoever it is, your colleagues, who can support you when you are at your weakest, but who are also going to be honest when it's time to step away from the fire, because that is important. You shouldn't have to burn yourself to keep everybody warm. That is critical. You cannot martyr yourself, because when you're dead, there is no voice.
Okay, that is amazing. Thank you. Such a wonderful points. Paula.
Thank you. So, Kath, I would say that, being strategic is not the same as being silenced. I think that we must balance caution with courage. I think that thoughtful timing, framing, and platform choice are forms of resilience, because we know that we cannot stay silent in the face of injustice. And I would go a step further to Asanda's advice about, having your family support, because some of us don't have our family support necessarily. And I would say find your tribe. Find, the people who sustain you. But more importantly, I would urge all of us on this call to really acknowledge that solidarity is a counterforce to isolation and intimidation. If we can support one another by boosting each other when they come under attack, by reinforcing the messages that might be unpalatable in public spaces but really need to be said and defended, by defending targeted voices, by really making sure that our colleagues have safety tools and resources in place, and just something as simple. I mean, I've been in spaces where it felt like I was alone in a particular space, only to find out months later that in fact people shared my views, people supported me. Is if you don't want to say it publicly, let the person know privately that you have their back, that you really support them. And then finally, I think the work that Ati does is really important in the sense that we need to be talking to these platforms directly and campaigning for structural change on the platforms. We cannot allow this to be normalized and allow them to make money off what happens to marginalized voices. So thanks very much, Kat.
Paula, that is such a great point. And I'm going to, if anybody has a question, please put your hand up, interrupt me, just talk. Otherwise, I am going to just pick up on what Paula said, which was something Paula, we very briefly have discussed before, which is structural change in this space as vital for the way forward. So I remember, Paula, I think the last time we spoke about it, you were using the term, and don't want to put words into your mouth and misremember, but I think we were even talking class actions for important organizations and individuals to start coming together to challenge structurally what is happening on social media. So I'm not sure, Ati, if you have any thoughts about that, or Asanda about that. So both what we can be doing individually, but what we can try and do on a more structural level to take on the platforms.
Okay. The conversations that we as Code for Africa have been having, sorry for the background noise, a little bit of background noise there, have always been to protect people online. And that is Facebook, that is Twitter, that is TikTok right now, have been to protect people. And we had made a lot of progress around that. We have a lot of CSOs across the continent that work with us, and that can actually bring in that voice as well. So connecting with each other is one of the most important things, and coming in as blocks to have these conversations with these platforms. It is a very challenging time, as you have mentioned right now, with what is happening in the US and so-called free speech. And there's been some digression, if I can put it that way, of those particular conversations. And however, the EU has come in to try and fill that void. But a lot of these conversations are happening quite behind closed doors. So the organizations that are leading these, where people are finding that these conversations are happening, I think there needs to be a lot more women in some of these organizations, and a lot more women that are making the point on the different platforms that where are these organizations? How do I join these organizations to get our views there? A lot of the work now is being done on a quite legislature kind of level. When we are looking at the EU Act right now on AI, the EU AI Act, there's been a lot of push for Africa to start to actually build some kind of framework. And I'm speaking about AI. It's not something that's far removed. AI is speaking to the algorithms that the likes of Facebook and Twitter and all these different platforms are using to either promote your particular tweet or post, and the kinds of people that are interacting with it, the kinds of parameters that are allowed for people to, whether they are pushing hate speech or disinformation. So those kinds of acts and that kind of legislation speaks to some of the issues that as women that we are dealing with in these kind of platforms. But we have to be a lot more engaged in the kind of legislature from kind of grassroots, whether we're talking to our representatives in parliament. How far are we with some of this kind of stuff? It doesn't, and it's not highbrow. I think when people think about legislation and policies and that kind of stuff, they think it's quite highbrow. It's what are the issues are we dealing with on the grassroots kind of level, and how then what kind of solutions would we want? Therefore, we need to engage with our policymakers from grassroots going up. So there has to be a lot more engagement from us as women to those kinds of policymakers to push for such policies where it comes to social media platforms and various platforms that we engage with. That would be one part of the advice. Because as companies like ourselves or NGOs, there is some kind of relationship that we have been trying to big it has started to receive at this point because of what's happening in the US, and most big techs are based there and registered there. We need a lot more of engagement.
Thanks, Ati. So we said 45 minutes. We've got a little bit over that. I'm going to ask one last comment from Paula and from Asanda, and then we'll close off. Thanks. Oh, sorry, and Ati as well. Just any last comment? You want to start, Ati? Any last comment?
A lot more engagement from women on these different platforms, wherever you choose to have your engagement. A lot more engagement needs to happen and a lot more pushback. It's very challenging, but as Paula said, if we are standing with each other on the different platforms, it will be a little bit easier.
Thanks, Ati. Amazing. Thank you so much. Asanda, final word from you.
I think that it's important for us to understand that, the women make up the majority population in most countries, but we make up the minority of voices. So every woman has a responsibility to use their voice and to speak up, because the more voices we have, they're more normalized and they're less alienating it feels to be one of the few women speaking. At the same time, though, I think people have to make the calculations for themselves based on their individual circumstances, what makes sense. And I think, one thing I've always said about activism is that not everybody, not all activists have to be on the front lines. The people, I always refer back to FISMAS 4. There were people who were providing food, there were people who were providing water, there were people who were sitting at night writing the posters announcing the protest, there were people who were organizing the lawyers that were going to break out the people who are on the front lines. So being an activist doesn't mean you have to always be on the forefront. It doesn't mean being on the forefront is the only way. In fact, what it is that those of us who have the personality that can withstand public scrutiny, that can have courage and push through even when it seems difficult, we are always going to end up on the front lines. But that's a personality thing and that's a preference and a choice thing. But it doesn't mean it's the only way to be activist. You can support organizations like Quote This Woman, whether it's financially, volunteering your time, or whatever it is. You can support organizations that are doing the things that you want to be done. You can support the people that are saying the things that you want to be said. Nothing warms my heart like the many inboxes, the many conversations in person that I have with people who say, I heard you talk about this and it changed my life. I understood whatever political, economic, or whatever it is for the first time when you said it, because that gives me courage. That encourages me to say the work that I'm doing is not futile, and those negative people on the internet are not the only people engaging with my work. And so those are, I think, the two main things that I would say. There is always going to be people attacking us. There's always going to be people telling you that what you're saying is wrong, you paid, or whatever it is. But we cannot and must not and will not and shall never surrender or stop because of that.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. So Paula, before you go, there's one comment that says, indeed, organized resistance and collective action make it harder for bad actors to silence us. So like Ati and Paula stated, we should connect with each other often. And I will add that we should speak up for each other within those platforms wherever possible. Thank you. Love that comment. And then Paula, final word from you.
So I know that today we spent a lot of time talking about the threat of online engagement, but I hope that everyone has really seen it as a call to action to go back to audit your online engagement, to make sure that your own security online, that you're using two-factor authentication, that you're actually taking care of your security online, that you put in place measures just to monitor people's engagement with you. I want to end off by saying that if your voice stands for justice, then it is by its very nature a threat to systems that are built on exclusion. But voice, when it's wielded collectively, when we stand together, as the comment said, right? When voice is wielded collectively and strategically, it still remains our most powerful tool for change. Nothing will change if we don't speak out. And so we need to find strategic, safe ways to do that. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, everybody. It was really great to have you all here. Just a quick reminder that Quote This Woman does a first Thursday at 3, every first Thursday of the month at 3 o'clock, on our Zoom link. And we're going to be taking up some more of these conversations and getting into some of the more practicalities of that at our next first Thursday. So all please do remember that. And thank you for being an amazing panel, Paula, Asanda, and Ati. And thank you for those who joined and listened and engaged today. It was really great to have you here. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.